All right, folks, welcome back. We're going to kick off the keynote here with Rudy DeFelice. Did I get that? DeFelice?
Good. Yeah.
All right. And he's going to be talking about AI and the rise of the wisdom economy, what history tells us about the future of legal work. Rudy, take it away.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks everyone for still being here. Been a great group today. Really privileged to have this time with you guys, and I do want to thank Jennifer, Kevin, and Patrick for putting a really great session together. So it's really been well run and having a great time. So my humble objective in this session is to paint a picture of what our industry will be like in the future in the wake of the most profound technological transformation in our lifetimes, maybe of all time. Secondly, to introduce you to what I think is a new economic paradigm for our species. So that's it, just those two minor things in 30 minutes. I used to live in New York, so I can talk fast, and I'm going to have to do that. So maybe we'll have some time to talk at the end. So here's the name of the session. So what's the future? This is something we're asking ourselves all the time, not only in our jobs, but in our lives. And there's a lot of predictions about the future. Because there's good money in making predictions, we only remember the ones that people get right. But I would say that that's not the best way to try to anticipate what's happening. This presentation is going to be an anti-prediction. I'm going to look at actual facts that we can demonstrate that I think will shed some light on what our future is going to be like. And I will give you like a run to the end. I think for us, the people in this room, it's going to be way better tomorrow than it is today. So what's my issue with predictions? Well, we're just really bad at it. There's a bunch of evolutionary biology reasons, a bunch of neuroscience reasons why we're not good at predicting the future. That's a whole other TED Talk. Suffice it to say, I'll just share some examples, which I think you'll find kind of fun. This is Thomas Watson saying he thought there would be a world market for maybe 5 computers. This wasn't just any guy. This guy was the CEO of IBM for a long time. And in a delicious irony, they named their most advanced AI product after this guy. But he got this really wrong. You'll remember this goofball, made a few bucks, was a really successful Microsoft leader, opining on consumer electronics. You think it's an area he knows something about. He said there's no chance the iPhone captures any market share. Gonna miss that one by a mile, right? How about this? A Nobel laureate in economics, opining on economics, giving this prediction: the internet's impact on the economy will be no greater than fax machine. And then my favorite one that had gotten wrong, Variety magazine in the 50s saying rock and roll will be dead by June. So the point of all this is we're just not that good at predicting the future. And there's so many notable examples where credible experts doing predictions in their own industry got it massively wrong. So what do? If we can't look to the future with a prediction, the only other direction is to look at the past. And that's one of the exercises I want to go through together with you guys. But why do I believe this? How did I come to this theory? Well, my first company was started in the early 2000s, and I had a whole bunch of sales conversations that kind of turned me onto this approach of looking backwards to understand what will happen forward. This is a summary of how my sales conversations went. You've probably been on one or other side of this kind of conversation. It was a productivity tool, so I'd talk to some guy in a law firm and I'd say, it's going to make you more productive. And of course they would respond with something like, well, we bill by the hour, so if I'm more productive, I'll make less profits. We know that it's a very superficial response, but it was a natural reaction. That was his prediction. And then I try to counter with, yeah, but everyone's going to shift to higher value tasks. That whole dichotomy, that dialogue that's still going on. But what happened was everyone believed their prediction over my prediction. So you could see the dilemma, right? Nobody's going to believe my prediction over theirs. So I had to find some way out of this box to get people to take the product seriously. So necessity is the mother of invention, right? So what I did, instead of looking forward and making a prediction and trying to convince people it was right, I said, what if I look at the past? What if I look at actual data to see what happened and see if that shed any light on what the future might be like? So one thing I looked at was law firm technology spend. And I did some research back in the day before ChatGPT. It was a lot harder, but it made a bar chart, it's a line chart kind of like this. You know, it kept moving up. Law firm technology spend over time was going up. Didn't surprise me. But then I looked at profits, and it was pretty much the same graph. Once I superimposed those over each other, and I said, listen, this is not causation, but at least there's no support for the proposition that law firm technology spend is going to make profits go down. This whole idea that we bill by the hour, we're going to make the best profits, it didn't stand up to an examination of history. So it just changed the whole conversation. By the way, in anticipation of this is not actual numbers, this is illustrative of what it was, because I did this like 20 years ago, but I looked at recent data, and it still holds. This is a very durable phenomenon. Firms are spending a lot more money on technology, but their profits continue to go up at about the same rate. It's kind of like the Moore's law of law firm economics. It seems to hold for a long time. So anybody who's out there who's hearing from somebody that, oh, it's going to cut our profits if we use more technology to make us better and more efficient. Sure, it's easy to say, it's a prediction, but there's no basis for it in the historical record. So we hear predictions all the time. We are, for the first time in legal, at the forefront of a transformative technology. Everybody's looking at legal and healthcare as a place where AI is going to manifest. And the predictions are somewhere between utopia and unemployment. So these are predictions, but they don't really have any relationship to the truth, according to the historical record, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. So the question I was asking myself is, what can we learn by looking backwards about what's going to happen in the future? It's an extrapolation exercise rather than a prediction exercise, but it's using real facts and real data. So let's take a journey together. Let me go all the way back to the first agricultural revolution and see if that could teach us something. A truly transformative technology. What I want to explore is what happened to the people who were the actors in the economy before the revolution, to see if it could teach us anything. So there's been anatomically recognizable humans on the planet for about 250 to 300,000 years. And for most of that time, we were hunters and gatherers. We would hunt meat and we would pick seeds and things like that. And at some point, about 12,000 BC, somebody in the Fertile Crescent said, what if we take some of these seeds that we're eating and plant them, put them in the ground, see what happens? And so was born the first agricultural revolution, and a bunch of interesting things happened. One, the populations of humans exploded. Our brains got larger. We developed communities because people stayed in one place. There was caloric abundance for the first time, and society took off. There was trade. Modern society, essentially history, happened as a result of this transformative technology. So a big deal. So what happened to those folks who were hunters and gatherers? So did they lose their jobs? No, the demand for seeds and game massively increased. Well, we need a lot more seeds because now we're in the agricultural business as a species. And secondly, more people meant they wanted to still eat meat, so there was a lot more demand. Some of them had much more business. Even in light of a technological transformation that you would think taking hunter-gatherers' work away, the opposite happened. And that's because the demand increased. In modern economic parlance, we would say the TAM, or not total addressable market, got a lot larger. Another example, a little more recent, at least in terms of the scope of history. Back in the 1400s, there was about 100 books printed a year in the whole world. Because the way a book was created was some scribe would copy something some author wrote with a quill pen onto paper. It took a long time to do. So there was 100 books. Most of the world was illiterate. And Johann Gutenberg invented the movable type printing press in or around 1440. And that was a super transformational technology in terms of human history. And what happened? We went from hundreds of books a year to within 10 years, over millions of books a year. And when you create readers, you create thinkers. So literacy exploded, but people started challenging old precepts about forms of government, some of the superstition that governed us, that the earth was the center of the universe, all these other things. So you had an explosion in literacy, an explosion of education. And of course, the demand for books massively increased. And like all transformative technologies, and when I say that term, what I mean is a technology that's so powerful and flexible, we don't really know how it's going to be used. If I invented, a drill, we used to have holes by hand on an electric drill. We pretty much know what that's going to be used for. It's an incremental technology. The internet was a transformative technology, right? We thought it was just about transferring files between academic institutions. It turns out to be the core of everything in our economy. So books were a transformative, the printing press was a transformative technology. We weren't exactly sure how it was going to be used, but it just changed the nature of books. It made a lot of the old scribes, so what happened to them? They lose their jobs? No, they became bookbinders, they became booksellers, some of them became authors. This massive increase in the industry just created jobs that were never anticipated before. And there was a lot more economic opportunity, and they were generally better jobs than the jobs that happened before. Writing a book out by hand, copying is a pretty crappy way to spend a human life, but opening a bookstore is not so bad, and being an author. So more recently, the auto assembly line. Around 1903, 1904, cars became a consumer product in the United States around the same time that the Wright brothers had their first flight. It was a pretty interesting decade, actually. And they were toys for the rich, though. They were never anticipated as the transportation model. We rode horses, and when we wanted to advance horses, we put a cart behind the horse, very incremental. The auto assembly line led to the auto industry, which was the transformative technology. The way cars were made before the assembly line was an individual craftsman would walk around the car and put parts on it, things like that. So the car stood still and the people moved. Henry Ford's innovation was, well, how about if the people stand still and the cars move? And that was the assembly line. And the time to build a car in a factory went from 12 hours to 1 hour, almost immediately. A factory that used to make 25 cars a day would now make about 1,000 cars a day, similarly as that. So an explosion of productivity, explosion of speed. The cost of a car went from $850 in 1910 to $100 a car in a couple of years. So all of a sudden, ordinary people could afford cars. The people working on the cars could afford to buy the cars. So the car industry exploded. Those craftsmen that were working on the cars, in the face of this transformative technology, they didn't lose their jobs. There was a lot more jobs. There was a massive explosion in the industry. There was upholstery businesses, tire businesses, window businesses. Somebody had to invent wipers and build that company. So all these jobs that never existed before that people didn't imagine arose. A highway system developed. When you had highway systems, we needed motels. So it's just all this downstream stuff. If you went home and told your spouse, well, we're on the assembly line now, I'm going to lose my job, that would have been so short-sighted because there were so many more jobs. And if you look at the arc of economic history, we live in a time where there's never been more money spent on technology than there was today. Today was a high watermark in all of human history, and we have, I think, record unemployment in this country too. So all the factors in the past point to the fact that the incursion of technology tends to grow the economy, leads to more opportunities, even if today we can't assume what all those opportunities are. So let's look at our industry and do some extrapolation about what might happen in the face of the transformative technology based on history. So we're a very visible and very prestigious industry, but we're really a niche market, if you think about it. Most people, like an automobile in 1915, can't afford legal services. We all deal with big, rich companies primarily, but most individuals can't afford real legal services. In fact, most companies can. You know, I've come from the startup world. I did all the legal services in all my companies until we were over 100 people, and most companies are less than 100 people. So most of our market can't afford our services. So what transformation might happen, I think, through the engine of a transformative technology that we're living through right now? We'll go from a niche market to a mass market. And as we've seen in all these other examples, when there's a mass market, so much more activity around the industry that it tends to grow. And it tends to grow in ways we can't anticipate. So if you're coming out of law school today, I can pretty much say, based on a historical record, there's going to be more opportunity than before this technology. But we can't all say what those opportunities are going to be. I have kids in high school until recently, and all their friends, like all other high school kids nationally, want to be social media influencers. That's kind of the number one goal. They don't want to be lawyers or doctors anymore. Social media influencer wasn't a job 10 or 12 years ago, right? So there's new things that happen all the time. It's not going to be that different this time, I don't think. There'll be new companies or just new economic activity because people will be in reach with some of the instruments of economic activity, and that will lead to more transactions, which will then need more help. Of course, there'll be an increased regulatory environment because the governments will protect individuals who are doing more elastic and agile kind of economic activity. So all the phenomena we've seen before, where there's a transformative technology that unleashes productivity, is likely to lead to an explosion in the industry. I think that's quite likely to happen, and it's at least as good as any prediction based on the future that doesn't take into account what's always happened in the past. So how do we, people in this room, our friends, the people in our industry, prepare for the transformation that we all know is coming, or is really kind of we're in the middle of in some ways? So the first thing I think is to understand what technology does. How does technology actually disrupt things? All the ones we've talked about have a similar property, which is that technology makes what was once formerly scarce and expensive plentiful and cheap. So these examples here, food used to be scarce and expensive, but once we could plant and have an agricultural industry, it became plentiful and cheap. The Industrial Revolution made not only cars, this is a picture of a textile mill. People used to own one thing of clothes, right? And because it was expensive and hard to get, after the Industrial Revolution, people started adding wardrobes. It's a concept that didn't even exist before. So it became plentiful and cheap. That's the engine that technology has as a transformational agent, is to make things that were once scarce, plentiful and cheap. So technology is now disrupting intelligence, really, for the first time. You've probably seen bar graphs like this. If you look at human intelligence held constant at 100 IQ, this is at least somebody's projection of what machine intelligence is, and it's past the average. It's still below the people in this room, probably, but it's coming for us, for sure. And look at that arc. I'm not getting smarter at that rate, I can tell you that. So I think technology is certainly disrupting intelligence. So what that means for us is a change in what's important and where we provide value to the economy. It's the end of knowing, in my opinion, as a differentiated asset. So this whole idea of what got you here won't get you there, I think is really at play in this world. You will no longer be the smartest, cheapest, or fastest at knowledge things. If you can interpret the tax code or program a computer or provide directions about some process, that was great probably until now. There's something that's going to be better than you at it, and probably is already. The machines I'm working on today have infinite knowledge. They lack other things, though, that we have. And that's kind of a lead into where I think human role is. But if you look at the pattern, technology displaced muscle, so we moved up to knowledge. Technology displaced knowledge, we have to move up to something. So what is that? That's this whole wisdom economy thing. But it's important to recognize we're in a new paradigm. We've invented electricity as a species, and the worst thing to do is to lean into candles at this moment. What you need to do is rehash the whole factory, because we're going to do things differently. That's really the opportunity. So I've kind of coined, I think, this term, the wisdom economy. We grew up in a knowledge economy. This is the progression, I think, of the economic models that were in play in our species through all of history. We were a skills economy since the beginning of time until probably the 1960s. And skills economy means I could build a car, I could plant, I could create stuff that required skills. Sometimes it was human, sometimes it was machines. But the economy was built around the skills necessary to produce things. Around the time most of us spent our lives in careers, I think, the 60s till just recently, we were a knowledge economy. We were all consider ourselves knowledge workers, I think. And if you read predictions, we are the center of the bullseye and the target for AI. Everybody will tell you that knowledge workers are going to be out of work. There's nothing in the historical record to support it, but it makes for a colorful prediction. And you know, the original sin of the internet is it's built on advertising. And I just want to say provocative things to get people to click on my site. That's the prediction I'm going to make, even though it's not supported by anything in history, in my opinion. So we've had a knowledge economy. We're now moving to a wisdom economy. And I want to talk about this wisdom economy and how to take advantage of it, how to position ourselves for players in the wisdom economy, because it is ours uniquely. This is not something the machines are going to be able to do pretty well, I don't think. So what is wisdom? Let's talk about that for a second. Wisdom has been studied since the pre-Socratic Greeks, and it has to do with a lot of these things, even in those days. I share this tomato image because somebody once told me that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So clearly, wisdom is something more than knowing. And we've relied on knowing because we've grown up in a knowledge economy, so that was reinforced. But wisdom's a different thing, and it's, you know, this is my list of what I think the key elements of wisdom are, and the standard that I've used for this is to judge what are the machines not going to be good at. Because the machines have infinite knowledge. They've digested the sum total of all expressed human knowledge, but they don't have any wisdom that's born from experience, understanding people, understanding the objectives of organizations. And I think these characteristics, judgment, ambition, influence, morality, and ethics in relationships, these are the things that I work on and lean on, at least. And I think you probably want to come up with your own thing based on where your career wants to go, your personal skills and things like that. But I guess the point is, I would tell everybody, find something that you can be best at. Don't be like relying on a player in the knowledge economy when machines are going to be better than you, and there's going to be someone overseas that's going to be cheaper than you, and there's all kinds of dynamics that create disadvantage. But we have a tremendous advantage here. Ray Kurzweil recently, and before that, Isaac Asimov, two authors I like a great deal, talk about this idea of transcendence. The idea that machines can help us transcend beyond the limitations of our physiology. And this is not a new phenomenon. I flew here at 550 miles an hour. I can't move that fast naturally, right? That is the advantage of me working with a machine to get here. By the way, in the 70s, it was faster than that, which is kind of interesting. So anyone wants to solve a technology problem, that would be great if air travel got a little better. But I think the future is going to be more and more merging of us and machines working together. And people are threatened by that, but I don't think you need to be. I think you need to recognize we have a role, and I think it's this wisdom as we move into a wisdom economy, which is the human experience. Machines are going to be good at knowledge kind of stuff and skills kind of stuff. And I think kind of a combined approach, embracing that is probably the most meaningful thing that we can do for our careers and really for the advancement of the species writ large. I often get accused of being a glass half full person because I talk to a lot of people who read the predictions and like, my job's going away and your job's going away. And so I want to bring a little science to this question before. You've heard this dichotomy before. Is that glass half full or is it half empty? Well, the truth is, if you take a scientific approach, the glass is always full. This one happens to be half full of water, half full of air. And we need them both to survive. And how I think about machines and humans, knowledge, wisdom, we need them both. And embracing that reality, I think, is kind of the exciting part for us. So I think I probably have a little time left, so I'd love to, I don't have anything else to present, but I'd love to talk about this. If anybody has any questions or comments or, you know, violent disagreement would be great too. I think we're here to exchange ideas. Yeah, no.
Do you see any precedent in other industries that you think legal will follow with respect to the agricultural model that you talked about, or with respect to democratizing access to services, or any other aspect of the potential to work?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key point, I think, is the theme is we'll follow all those things because they were transformative technologies that at the time you probably thought like, well, I'm sunk, you know what I mean? I build cars, you know what I mean? I'm a machine building cars. So I think that that phenomenon plays out because there's nothing in the historical record to disprove it. All we have is predictions on the other side, but all the history is this way. Somebody said to me when I shared this concept with them, but it's different now because these machines are a lot smarter and they'll take over everything. And I said, well, what do you mean by smart? I said, they're as good as a human, and now we're going to introduce all kinds of humans. But in my lifetime, in the United States, we've introduced 150 million new humans. And they didn't take all the jobs, right? There's just more jobs, right? So I think when you introduce technology that can expand economic activity, expand productivity, there's going to be more demand for everything. So yes, I think those themes continue. All of those are examples.
How do you think the wisdom economy will affect legal specifically, or lawyers? Like an example, how lawyers, their job might specifically change with wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, I think the best lawyers right now are already wisdom actors, right? Like when I go to my most trusted lawyer, I'm generally not asking them about case law or regulations. You know, I'm trying to say, we've got a dilemma with the team or a partner or something like that. Like, how do I navigate this? So who do you know? You know, what are your relationships? Who could you come in and influence for me? What have you seen before that's like this? Like those kind of things, I think, are our most valuable skills. And I think we all need to practice that a little more. Now, we haven't all been able to do that because somebody needs to grind out the case law research. But now we've got something that grinds out the case law research. So we can all take this kind of higher place in the ecosystem. I think. But the point is, really, we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, this is the internet in 1992. I can't really tell you how it's going to be used. All I can tell you is that all historical examples show that there's going to be a lot more of everything. That's exactly the opposite of what you probably see in the paper.
So you made this comment earlier that technology makes what used to be scarce and expensive, plentiful, and cheap.
Yeah.
So do you think that's going to have a dramatically disruptive influence on or impact on the legal, the elite law business model and destroy the elite law and the profitability there, while not destroying the profession, but like really change the economics of it dramatically?
That's an interesting question. I will tell you what I think. One, I think the economic model in legal should be challenged, and I can't believe it hasn't been challenged in the marketplace a little bit more, but I don't think the technology will be the agent for that. I think it's gonna, and just looking at precedent, which is something we do in the law all the time, individual car prices went way down, but car profits went way up, right? Automobile industry went way larger. So it might cost less to draft a complaint, it might cost less to respond to a motion, but there'll be so much more activity that goes on for so many more people. I think the professionals in it will have more opportunity ultimately. At least that's the arc of history, So it's hard to look at things like an individual transaction and draw, the epiphenomenal trends, you know what I mean? So you could look at
So the lawyer making the $2,000 an hour is probably going to go away, but the law firm making $3 billion a year is going to make $5 billion a year.
No, I think
or no.
I think that guy will still make $2,000 an hour for the ridiculous reasons that he makes it right now. But I just think there'll be a lot more activity like that, right? There'll be a lot more demand for that kind of judgments. I also think the firms will make more money, but individual transactions might get cheaper, right? So let's say that person who's making $2,000 an hour could work on 15 things a year, be able to work on 1,500 things a year, right? So, and it won't take an hour, it will take 10 minutes or something like that. So I don't see any reason or any historical precedent for the fact that the individual salaries will go down, but the individual transactions will be cheaper. There'll be a lot more of it. That's the premise that I hope that makes sense.
Really, what concern out here a lot is, especially amongst young professionals, right, who are entering the knowledge economy or getting started in the wisdom economy now, like, how do you develop those people into wisdom level thinkers if they're not engaging in kind of the base knowledge level?
That's an excellent question. I think experience is part of it, right? And, if I was your age, I'd be leaning into the advantage of using these tools in a way that just made me more central to economic. You don't have to wait in line like I did when I was right. I had to wait for somebody to retire to get any responsibility. I think you can get it right now. And through that, when you develop experience, it develops some perspective. So, I think it's getting your hands dirty, and I think the opportunity to get your hands dirty is a lot better now than it was a generation ago. I was at a conference once where somebody said, yeah, but what about all this hands-on training that we do for young lawyers and stuff like that? And somebody raised their hand and said, you're assuming facts, not in evidence. We don't have any economics for training people anymore. We throw them in and we give them crappy work to do and just hope that they absorb some stuff. And that's not really a good model. I think if I was starting a legal practice right now, I'd be able to add value earlier. I'd be able to learn from a lot more sources. And I think that would probably accelerate the development of, what I consider wisdom skills. But I will acknowledge that this is really a new paradigm for economic activity. We don't exactly know how it's going to unfold, right? Like if this was 1962, and you would ask me that same question, how do I position myself in the knowledge economy? I would have taken a couple of guesses like this, but it probably wouldn't have unfolded that way. But understanding that we're in this paradigm, I think, is the first start. And I don't think that there's widespread recognition that, oh my God, this is a shift in the whole economic model for a species. It's a big deal. It's only happened 3 times, in my view of it. Thanks for the question. Anything else? Kevin, anything we should do to wrap?
I think Anand will probably have a couple of comments to wrap the day with.
Yes.
Rudy does.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really good conversation.
All right, with my, I think, 4 minutes that I have left, I just want to One, thank all of you for attending here today, and just go through a couple closing remarks based on some takeaways that I've had throughout the day. So let me just start with the first one that really stuck out to me, and that was from the Paul Weiss and Harvey presentation this morning. And this was from the always brilliant Gina Lynch, and her mandate at her firm, that attorneys at her firm, go to clients and share with them all of the ways that they are using technology to do legal work much more cheaply. And I thought that was brilliant. What she said was, we want to do that before the clients are talking about ways that they could automate us out using technology. We want to be in the room when we say we're going to use technology to do the 45-hour task in 15 minutes. I think more firms are going to be doing this. To Rudy's point, if there's much, much more work, they can afford it. Let's talk about Ted's panel this morning. Big thing that I got from him is that adoption speed is everything. I think it's something that a lot of us take for granted. There's a lot of these legal AI tools that are shelfware that don't get used. The ones that are being picked up by the LegalTech Fund and VCs, et cetera, are the ones that are being adopted and used. I think very simple but elegant. I really like this schematic presentation this afternoon. Two big takeaways from that in my mind. Number one, VC is not for everyone. I'm from San Francisco. This is shocking to me, but so true. So true. It's not for everyone. It's a certain kind of product if you want to see it that way. The other thing that really stuck me from that presentation was that it seemed like the entire fate of that company turned on one LinkedIn message that was sent out by the CEO. I think that's just so common across companies. I've seen it in my career. I've seen it among friends and colleagues. The same kind of thing, just on a lark, sending a message that ends up being company changing. Rudy, I really enjoyed your talk. One of the things that I was thinking about when Sergey, if I could read your name right, asked his question, I was thinking about accountants and spreadsheets. The fact that, in the 1970s or 80s, the only people who could afford accounting services were maybe like middle-sized companies and larger, where now I dare you to find a bodega or a food truck that doesn't have an accountant, right? I wonder whether that, through the power of Excel, back then like Lotus Notes, expanded availability. And I was really thinking about that, and I'm wondering whether that is an interesting angle in legal. Might AI be the AI in the 2020s, be the Excel in the 1980s and 90s for accounting? I don't know. Ask Rudy. I'm just asking the questions. Okay, let's wrap up here. We've got a great networking event coming up next with the Lex Prize Award. Is that right, Kevin? For that, head straight out the door. We'll see you here 9 a.m. tomorrow, folks. Thank you.